To news from further afield, and the U.S. Congress tables a bill calling for a full review of its bilateral relationship with South Africa following its pursuit of justice for the Palestinian people in the International Court of Justice. The bill argues that the South African government also has a problematic history of siding with countries like Tehran, Moscow and Beijing. Tensions have deepened between Washington and Pretoria over South Africa's non-partisan position in the Russia-Ukraine war and Israel's continued bombardment of Gaza. The bill calls on a network of players, including the U.S. president, various departments and agencies, to conduct a full-scale review of the relationship. The U.S. is one of South Africa's biggest trading partners through AGOA, which is a preferential trade pact. Professor Christopher Isike with the Department of Political Sciences at the University of Pretoria joins us now to share some perspective on this. Good evening to you and welcome, Prof, as always. We have been here for other reasons before the termination of the relationship between South Africa and the US on AGOA was stayed. Is this review likely to see a different and adverse outcome for South Africa this time?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Look, this is a bill that has been introduced by two members of the bipartisan bill, two members of Congress. I do not. We will have to wait for the bill to pass and become an act, and that is approved by the president before we can begin to look at its wider implications. As it is now, I doubt that it will be able to pass because there are multiple interests even within both parties that will have problems with certain portions of the bill as it is. But if it does pass, it can clearly then align with a similar bill that was introduced by Senator Chris Coons to do an out-of-cycle review on whether South Africa should remain a beneficiary of the AGOA. So that's my view on this, basically.
Yeah. I guess the fact that it's a bipartisan bill, which is where I was going, means that both Democrats and Republicans support it. Does that increase the potential of it being passed? Notwithstanding the fact, as you say, there will be some disagreements in between with some of the details. It is a huge network of interests that are represented here. But just on the point that it's supported, in essence, by both sides of the House, what does that say about the direction it might go in?
Well, we need to also interrogate what we mean by both sides of the House, because the people who have been at the forefront of this bill are those who are extremists of both parties, if you know what I mean, and they are actually on the fringes. There are, for example, strong members of the Democrat Party that support South Africa's action, against Israel. For instance, those people have a strong say also in the fortunes of the party in the next elections. Will not necessarily vote for such a bill. So it's a question of who are those behind the bill on both sides of the aisle, and whether they can muster enough support across the parties to get this so-called bipartisan support for this bill to be passed by the House of Congress. And even if it does pass Congress, it also would go to the Senate, where it will face another hurdle before it comes to the president, who will also have a say in what the final output would be. So it's still a long way to go. The fact that we have 2 or 3 members for the House across the parties does not really translate to bipartisanship.
Yeah, really important context that you're sharing with us there, Professor Isike. So given that the US has, in the wording of this bill or proposal, made the accusation of South Africa supporting Hamas since 1994 and consistently accusing Israel of practicing apartheid, why do you think it's taken this moment for them to act?
You mean the Congress?
Well, the fact that both of these representatives are now bringing the issue to South Africa, even though historically there's been a problem with the way that South Africa's viewed their relationship with Hamas.
Yeah, so there are all kinds of reasons why this could be happening now. Maybe this is a deal breaker for some of these Congress members, especially when you look at the influence of the Israeli lobby group in U.S. politics. So this could be something that they could be sponsoring. Who knows? But the point is that some of the things they talk about, and this is the concern that I have. The things they talk about, how the African National Congress has led the country, talking about its contradictions, its policy failures, inefficiencies, and even mentioned, if I remember correctly, they mentioned state capture, the outbreak of cholera, the worst in 15 years. These are failings of the state, the internal governance in South Africa that should not get a mention in a bill like this, because we can throw it right back at them and talk about the many failures of the American governance system, the dysfunctionality of politics, the bifurcation of the state into two zones of Democrats and Republicans, and nothing else in between. These kinds of dysfunctionality that we see and democracy declining, and the fact that America also has serious infrastructural challenges across the country that does not befit its status as a first world country or as the world superpower. It will not fare well if South Africa begins to say we want to review our relationship with the US because it has challenges with how it is governed, it has challenges with its democracy, and it has challenges with how it does things internally. That for me is what is the sorry part of this particular bill. Otherwise, yes, they have a legitimate concern in terms of what the relationship that they have with countries like South Africa. The constitution allows the Congress to review the relationship with countries that they feel undermine America's national security and foreign policy interests. That's legitimate. Yeah. But the focus on our internal politics and dynamics, speaks to a contradiction, if not a hypocrisy, when you look at the internal feelings of the American political system.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating because what you're saying is, by the same measure that you're criticizing us, use that matrix on yourself and you would be found wanting, which is what you're talking about, the hypocrisy of applying that tool as a measure of how South Africa is performing and whether this relationship should continue or not. Again, as always, wish we had, endless time to talk about this, but it's a big one. We are going to be watching it. As you say, it still has to be the subject of some discussion and so on. And there are many legal steps that must be followed even before it becomes accepted as an act, if it comes to that. So we will definitely talk about this with you again. Professor Christopher Isike, who is with the University of Pretoria's Political Sciences Department.